Welcome back, and thank you for tuning into Cheating Tales Lab. We appreciate every single one of you. We'd love to know what part of the world are you watching from right now. Let us know in the comments. Now, let's dive into today's story. The blue light from the monitor cast harsh shadows across Warren Fletcher's face as he sat in his home office, the quiet hum of his computer the only sound breaking the 2 a.m. silence. His posture remained perfectly still, fingers hovering over his wife Linda's unlocked phone, a careless mistake on her part, leaving it charging in the kitchen while she slept upstairs. 20 years of analyzing market patterns had honed his ability to spot irregularities, and the messages between Linda and his brother James practically screamed at him. They'd coded their conversations in financial jargon, thinking themselves clever. Market penetration looking strong for Q3, James's message read. Overnight positions extremely favorable. Warren's jaw tightened as he scrolled through months of similar exchanges. The timestamps told their own story messages sent during family dinners, during their anniversary dinner, even during Matt's birthday celebration. I hear creaking footsteps, Linda wrote in one message. Having to maintain position until coast clear. Meet tomorrow instead? Copy that. Standard rendezvous point. Don't forget to clear chat history this time, James replied. The door behind Warren burst open, fluorescent light from the hallway flooding in. Matt, his 15-year-old son, stood there in rumpled pajamas, face twisted in adolescent fury. What are you doing? Matt demanded, storming into the office. Mom's phone? Seriously? Warren turned slowly, keeping his expression neutral. You should be in bed, Matt. So you can spy on Mom some more? Matt's voice cracked with anger. She already told me what's going on. Uncle James is helping her diversify her portfolio since you're too controlling about money. She warned me you might pull something like this. Did she now? Warren's voice remained steady, even as his fingers tightened around the phone. And what else has your mother been telling you about me? Matt crossed his arms, chin jutting out defiantly. The truth that you're pathetic and paranoid. That you can't stand anyone else having any control, especially since Uncle James made partner before you did. Mom needs someone who actually listens to her. Warren rose from his chair, pocketing Linda's phone in one smooth motion. The movement made Matt take an involuntary step back, despite his bravado. Go to bed, Matt. Warren walked past his son, each step measured and controlled. She's right about you. Matt shouted after him. You're always like this, controlling everything, suspecting everyone. No wonder she needs someone else to talk to. At least Uncle James treats her like an actual person. Warren continued down the hallway, letting Matt's words echo behind him. His son's voice, so similar to James's, only strengthened his resolve. Linda had played this perfectly, turning their son against him before he'd even discovered the truth. But she'd forgotten one crucial detail about Warren Fletcher. He never acted without absolute certainty, and he was just getting started. Over the next 3 weeks, Warren became a ghost in his own home. He left early, returned late, barely spoke during meals. Linda seemed relieved by his apparent withdrawal, while Matt watched him with teenage contempt. Neither noticed the careful groundwork being laid. The hidden cameras went in first, discreet, high-end models installed throughout the house while Linda was at her yoga class. Warren watched the footage each night from his private office downtown, building his case methodically. The financial audit came next. Warren had always kept separate books for his personal accounts, a habit James had once mocked as paranoid. Now, those detailed records helped him trace the money trail. James hadn't just been embezzling from client accounts, he'd targeted Matt's college fund specifically, siphoning money through a series of offshore accounts registered under Linda's maiden name. Mr. Fletcher? His assistant Sandra knocked on his office door one evening. I found those irregularities you asked about in the trust account documentation. Warren looked up from his monitor. Show me. Sandra laid out a series of papers, pointing to highlighted sections. The signatures authorizing these transfers, they're dated during your hospital stay last year. When you were having that emergency appendectomy. Indeed. Warren's smile didn't reach his eyes. And who witnessed these signatures? Your brother James and Mrs. Fletcher, sir. Sandra hesitated. There's something else. The amounts, they match perfectly with deposits made to an account in the Caymans. An account that's listed as a joint holder with Mrs. Fletcher's maiden name. Warren leaned back, steepling his fingers. Excellent work, Sandra. I need you to compile all of this into 5 separate packages. Each one should tell a complete story on its own, but contain different pieces of evidence. Can you handle that? Of course, sir. Sandra paused at the door. Mr. Fletcher? Should I include the footage from the house cameras in these packages?
No.
Warren's voice hardened. That's for a different purpose entirely. The final piece fell into place 3 days later. Warren had been saving Linda's personal safe for last, the one she thought he didn't know about, hidden behind the false panel in her closet. The combination wasn't difficult to crack. Linda had always used significant dates for her passwords. Inside, beneath the expected jewelry and cash, he found a manila envelope. The medical letter had caught his eye immediately. Genetic testing results from 15 years ago, dated just after Matt's birth. Warren read each page carefully, his suspicions crystallizing into cold certainty. The dates aligned perfectly. 9 months before Matt's birth, Linda had taken a business trip with James. Warren remembered that week clearly. He'd been stuck in New York, closing a major deal while they'd gone to a conference in Miami. The hotel receipts tucked into the envelope showed they'd shared a room. Warren replaced everything exactly as he'd found it, closed the safe, and returned to his office. He pulled up the footage from the cameras he'd installed. There, in high definition, was his wife and brother. In his bed. Their voices came through the hidden microphones with perfect clarity. Warren's getting suspicious. Linda's voice, breathless and amused. Matt says he was going through my phone the other night. James laughed. Let him look. He'll never figure out our little code. Besides, he's too afraid of losing his precious reputation to ever make accusations without proof. Sometimes I wonder if he knows about Matt, Linda mused. But he's too proud to admit he raised another man's son. As long as we're careful with the money transfers, he'll never risk the scandal of looking too closely. Warren stopped the playback. He'd seen enough. Opening his laptop, he began composing 5 very carefully worded emails to different investigative agencies. Each one would be sent automatically, staggered over the next few weeks, unless he entered a specific code every 48 hours. It was time for the first strike. Warren's opening move was surgical in its precision. At exactly 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, Linda's credit card stopped working as she tried to pay for her weekly tennis lesson. By noon, she discovered their joint accounts frozen. At 2 p.m., her personal accounts, the ones she thought Warren didn't know about, similarly went dark. He watched through the house cameras as she paced the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear. James, something's wrong. Her voice shook slightly. All the accounts, they're locked. Even the private ones. He couldn't know about those, could he? Warren smiled as James's voice came through, cocky as ever. Relax, Linda. He's probably just throwing a tantrum because I landed the Peterson account. You know how he gets when I outperform him. I'll come over tonight and we'll sort it out. Perfect. Exactly as planned. The front door slammed as Matt arrived home from school. Warren watched his son storm into the kitchen, face flushed with anger. Dad's gone crazy, Matt shouted. He's canceling my college fund. The bank called to confirm the closure of my trust account. Linda's face went pale. What? That's impossible. He can't access those accounts without. She trailed off, realization dawning. Warren zoomed in on her expression, savoring the moment she understood just how thoroughly she'd been outplayed. Without what, Mom? Matt demanded. What's really going on? Nothing, sweetie. Linda's recovery was quick, but Warren caught the tremor in her voice. Your father's just being difficult. Uncle James is coming over tonight to help sort everything out. Warren switched cameras to follow Matt as he stormed upstairs, pulling out his phone. The boy's angry voice carried clearly through the hidden microphones. Dad, what the hell are you doing? Call me back, you coward. You can't just destroy our family because you're jealous of Uncle James. Warren picked up his office phone, dialing his son's number. Matt answered on the first ring. Finally, what is wrong with you? Mom's crying downstairs. Is she? Warren's voice remained perfectly level. Interesting timing. Considering the Peterson account James just landed was a sting operation set up by the SEC. The indictments should be hitting the news any minute now. What? You're lying. Uncle James would never. Check your phone, Matt. Breaking news should be coming through right about. Now, he heard Matt's sharp intake of breath as the notifications started flooding in. Major financial news networks breaking the story of James Fletcher, rising star hedge fund manager, caught in a massive fraud scheme. You did this? Matt's voice cracked. You set him up? No, Matt. He did this to himself. I just made sure he couldn't hide it anymore. Warren paused, letting that sink in. You chose your side. Remember that. He ended the call and turned back to his monitors. Right on schedule, James's car was pulling into the driveway. Warren switched to the kitchen camera, watching as his brother burst in, his usual swagger replaced by barely controlled panic. Linda, we have a problem, James started. I know. Linda cut him off. Warren's frozen everything. Even the accounts you set up for me. How did he? Forget about that. James ran his hands through his hair. The SEC just raided my office. They're saying something about the Peterson account being a front. They have documentation going back months. Warren leaned back, allowing himself a small smile as he watched them spiral into chaos. The first domino had fallen exactly as planned. His phone buzzed right on schedule. The first of his 5 carefully prepared evidence packages had just been delivered to the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Some people thought revenge was best served cold. Warren knew better. Revenge should be served methodically, precisely, with each element building on the last until there was nowhere left to hide. And this was just the beginning. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Fletcher mansion's windows as Linda descended the stairs, her silk robe trailing behind her. The house felt different, emptier somehow. She'd noticed Warren's closet cleaned out last night, but assumed he'd merely moved his things to the guest room. Warren? Her voice echoed through the quiet house. No response. She found the manila envelope on the kitchen counter, her name written in Warren's precise handwriting. Inside were divorce papers, along with a settlement offer that made her eyes widen. Full ownership of the house, a generous monthly allowance, and several investment properties transferred into her name. Linda's laughter echoed through the kitchen as she dialed James's number. He ran. Can you believe it? Left me divorce papers and rolled over like a good boy. What are the terms? James's voice crackled through the speaker. Everything I could want. The house, properties, monthly payments. Linda flipped through the documents. He's not even contesting anything. Must be terrified of what would come out in court. Send me copies. I'll have my lawyer review them, but this could be perfect. The great Warren Fletcher, slinking away in the night. James's smugness carried clearly through the phone. Guess he wasn't as tough as everyone thought. Matt wandered into the kitchen, eyes red from lack of sleep. Dad's really gone? Linda wrapped an arm around her son's shoulders. It's for the best, sweetie. Your father. He couldn't handle the truth about himself. But don't worry. Uncle James and I will make sure you're taken care of. There's an envelope for Matt, too, James noted, reviewing the paperwork Linda had sent. Says not to open it until his 18th birthday. Probably some pathetic attempt at explanation, Linda scoffed. Matt, darling, you don't have to keep it if you don't want to. Matt took the envelope, turning it over in his hands. Despite everything, his father's handwriting stirred something in him. Memories of learning to write his name, Warren patiently guiding his hand. He tucked the envelope into his pocket without comment. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and paperwork. Linda signed everything without contest, eager to begin her new life. She didn't notice her country club friends' subtle withdrawal, or how her lunch invitations went unanswered with increasing frequency. We should celebrate, James declared one evening, lounging in what had been Warren's favorite chair. Show everyone that we've nothing to be ashamed of. Host a party right here. Linda's eyes lit up. Perfect. We'll invite everyone. Make it clear we're not hiding. Mom, Matt interrupted from the doorway. The Petersons just canceled my standing invitation to their lake house. They said they've heard things. Darling, they're just jealous. Linda waved dismissively. People love to gossip. Once they see how well we're doing, they'll come around. But they didn't. The party invitations met with a wave of polite declinations. Even Linda's oldest friends suddenly had prior commitments. It's fine, James assured her, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. We'll show them. I'm closing a huge deal next week. That'll shut them up. Neither noticed the subtle changes happening around them. How credit card companies began questioning charges. How business associates started requiring additional documentation for routine transactions. How whispers followed them at restaurants. Warren's ghost lingered in every suspicious glance, every unanswered call, every closed door. But they celebrated anyway, convinced they'd won. They never saw the shadows closing in. From his minimalist office overlooking Seattle's waterfront, Warren orchestrated their destruction with the precision of a chess grandmaster. Multiple screens displayed real-time updates of his various initiatives, each one designed to tighten the noose around James and Linda's necks. Mr. Fletcher? His new assistant, Rebecca, entered with a tablet. The SEC just scheduled James's hearing for next Tuesday. Coincidentally, during the investor meeting he's been planning for months, Warren's smile was razor-sharp. Interesting timing. Has he tried rescheduling? 3 times. Each attempt was denied due to administrative errors. Also, an anonymous source just provided the Washington Post with documentation about his involvement in the Peterson scandal. Make sure that breaks during the charity gala Linda's hosting next weekend. Warren pulled up a calendar. Speaking of which, how many guests have canceled so far? 70%, sir. Most cited unexpected conflicts after receiving those anonymous emails detailing the length of the affair. The screen showed various angles of James's office as SEC agents executed another raid. Warren watched his brothers FOD crack as they uncovered each carefully planted piece of evidence. The timing was crucial, each revelation designed to maximize impact. Sir? Rebecca hesitated. The latest surveillance shows Linda attempting to access the offshore accounts. Right on schedule. Warren typed a command, and another screen lit up with financial data. She'll find them drained, transferred to accounts under James's name just before the SEC investigation began. Let's see how she reacts to that. The footage from Linda's home office showed her face contorting with rage as she discovered the empty accounts. Her phone call to James was immediate and heated. You bastard. Her voice crackled through the surveillance feed. Those were my accounts. My money. Linda, I can explain, James started. Explain? The SEC is breathing down our necks. Every account is frozen. And now I find out you've stolen my safety net? I trusted you. Warren leaned back, watching the partnership crumble. Rebecca, make sure Linda receives proof of James's other affairs tomorrow morning. Time it with the country club's board meeting. Already scheduled, sir. Also, her sister just received documentation about Linda's role in the embezzlement scheme. Family support, the last pillar to fall. Warren checked another screen showing Matt's college applications, each one marked with carefully placed flags that would ensure rejection. How's the market manipulation coming along? Your predictions were perfect, sir. The volatility has wiped out 60% of James's remaining legitimate investments. His clients are panicking. Warren nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Release the next batch of evidence to the FBI. Let's see how James handles defending himself against both the SEC and federal charges. The screens showed James at his office, desperately trying to calm investors as news of the FBI investigation broke. His tie was askew, sweat staining his collar. I assure you, these allegations are completely false. James's voice cut off as his phone buzzed. His face went pale reading the message. Warren switched views to Linda's phone. She'd just sent James proof that she'd been recording their conversations for years, threatening to take it to the authorities unless he covered her losses. Sir? Rebecca appeared again. Linda's attempt to play the wronged wife isn't working. The evidence you planted makes her look like the mastermind. Her own lawyer just dropped her case. Excellent. Warren pulled up another file. Time for Phase 3. Make sure these documents reach the district attorney. Show them how Linda manipulated the accounts while James was distracted with other affairs. The destruction was methodical, each revelation timed to maximum effect. Society galas became battlegrounds as former friends turned their backs. Business meetings transformed into ambushes as clients discovered betrayals. Every attempt at damage control only sprang another carefully laid trap. And through it all, Warren watched, orchestrating additional calamities just when they thought they'd found their footing. Matt stood in the foyer of what had once been home, watching movers cart away another piece of furniture. The house felt hollow now, echoing with the ghosts of better days. His mother's voice carried from the study, shrill with desperation. "What do you mean, foreclosure?" James promised he'd handle the payments. Matt didn't need to hear James's response. He'd watched his uncle's descent over the past months, from confident hedge fund manager to desperate man drowning in accusations. The college fund's disappearance had been just the beginning. Master Matthew Thompson, their butler of 15 years, stood at attention. "I'm afraid this will be my last day. Your mother's checks have been unreliable." "I understand, Thompson." Matt managed a weak smile. "Thank you for everything." The butler hesitated. "If I may, sir, your father." "Don't." Matt turned away. "Just don't." Later that evening, he sat in his increasingly bare room, scrolling through news articles. Each one seemed worse than the last. James Fletcher, once celebrated financier, now faced multiple federal indictments. The latest showed him leaving court, Linda nowhere in sight. His phone buzzed. Another text from his mother. "Don't believe what they're saying. James is handling it. Everything will be fine." Matt switched tabs to his college applications. Rejection after rejection, each citing mysterious character concerns. His grades were perfect, his extracurriculars impressive, but something shadowed every attempt at his future. The doorbell rang. Matt heard his mother's sharp intake of breath, followed by angry voices. Federal agents, more of them. This time they had questions about her role in the financial schemes. "Mrs. Fletcher," one agent's voice carried upstairs, "we have evidence suggesting you were more than just an innocent spouse. Care to explain these transfers?" "This is ridiculous." Linda's voice cracked. "James handled all the finances. I knew nothing about." "Then you won't mind explaining these emails? The ones where you detailed exactly how to move funds through shell companies." Matt crept to the stairs, watching the scene unfold. His mother, once the picture of sophisticated elegance, now looked brittle and desperate. "I want my lawyer," she demanded. "The one who dropped your case this morning?" The agent's smile was cold. "We have some questions about your conversations with him too." Later that night, Matt overheard his mother and James arguing in the study. Their voices had lost all pretense of affection, raw with accusation and fear. "You promised me it was foolproof," Linda screamed. "Now they're saying I could face charges." "Me. If you'd stuck to the story instead of trying to save yourself," James shot back. "Save myself? While you were emptying accounts and sleeping with half the country club. At least I didn't record everything like some paranoid. Those recordings were insurance, you bastard. Insurance you made necessary." Matt retreated to his room, their voices following him. He pulled out the envelope from his father, still sealed, still waiting for his 18th birthday. 3 more years. His fingers traced the writing, wondering what final message Warren had left him. The house groaned around him, emptying piece by piece. Outside, reporters gathered like vultures, waiting for the next scandal to break. Their neighbors had long since stopped acknowledging their existence. He checked his phone again. Another college rejection. This one from a safety school he should have walked into. The words blurred before his eyes. After careful consideration, character concerns, unable to offer admission. Downstairs, the argument had devolved into threats. "You want to play hardball?" James's voice shook with rage. "I've got enough dirt to bury you. Try it." Linda's laugh was harsh. "You think Warren was thorough? You have no idea what I know about your dealings." They destroy each other, Matt realized. And he was caught in the middle, watching his world crumble piece by piece. Every time they thought they'd hit bottom, another trap sprung. Another scandal broke. Another door closed. His father's last words to him echoed, "You chose your side. Remember that." Now, surrounded by the ruins of his family's life, Matt finally understood the weight of that choice. 8 years had carved deep lines into Matt Fletcher's face as he stood before the imposing glass tower in downtown Seattle. Fletcher Financial Forensics dominated the skyline, a gleaming monument to his father's success. The irony wasn't lost on him that the company specialized in preventing exactly the kind of fraud his uncle had committed. His last rejection letter crinkled in his pocket, Another character concern flag from a potential employer. 3 months of working as a barista in Portland had barely covered his rent, let alone the mounting medical bills he couldn't explain to anyone. Mr. Fletcher? The security guard's voice pulled him from his thoughts. I need to scan your ID. The guard's eyes widened slightly at the name, but he said nothing as he handed back the license. Matt had seen that look before, people recognizing the connection to both the company's founder and the infamous fraud case that had rocked the financial world 8 years ago. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, but Matt's mind raced with memories. His mother's face when they'd lost the house. James being led away in handcuffs on national television. The slow realization over the years that every closed door, every rejected application, somehow traced back to his father's influence. Rebecca Chin, Warren's executive assistant for the past 8 years, looked up as Matt approached her desk. Her expression revealed nothing, but Matt noticed how her hand moved slightly closer to what he assumed was a panic button. Your father is expecting you, she said, pressing a button on her desk. Though I should warn you, he's had this meeting scheduled in his calendar for 3 years. Of course he had. Warren Fletcher's reputation for meticulous planning had only grown since he'd transformed his revenge into a legitimate empire. Fletcher Financial Forensics was now the gold standard in fraud prevention, their methods studied at business schools worldwide. The corner office was exactly what Matt expected, minimalist, imposing, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Warren stood at the window, his reflection overlaid against Seattle's skyline. 8 years had added silver to his hair, but hadn't diminished his presence. Hello, Matt. Warren didn't turn around. Still working at Groundwork Coffee? Tips must be down this season. Matt's carefully rehearsed speech evaporated. How did you? I built this company by knowing things others try to hide. Warren finally turned, gesturing to a chair. Your mother's working at Nordstrom now, correct? And James, released last year, living in a halfway house in Tacoma, still claiming he was set up. The casual display of surveillance made Matt's stomach turn. They lost everything. The house, their reputations, their self-respect. Warren's smile was razor-sharp. That implies they had any to begin with. I can't even get into community college because of mysterious flags that keep appearing. Character concerns. Warren nodded. Fascinating how those follow patterns, isn't they? Rather like market trends. Or DNA. Matt swallowed hard. I need help with college fees. Mom and Uncle James. Ah yes, Uncle James. Warren's voice carried a decade of cold fury in those 2 words. Tell me, how's your health lately, Matt? Any unexplained symptoms? Headaches? Joint pain? Matt's hand instinctively went to his side, where the mysterious pains had been getting worse. Warren's eyes tracked the movement, his expression unchanging. 15 years of loyalty to them. Warren reached into his desk drawer and removed a familiar envelope, the one he'd left 8 years ago. Let's see what that bought you. The envelope's seal cracked with a finality that sent chills down Matt's spine. Warren spread its contents across his desk with the precision of a car dealer. DNA tests, photographs, transcripts, and medical records. Each one a carefully preserved piece of evidence. The DNA results you probably expected by now, Warren began, his voice clinical. James's paternity was merely the beginning. The recordings are more interesting. He pressed a button on his desk, and Linda's voice filled the room. Matt's perfect for this. Warren's too proud to admit he's raising another man's son. As long as the kid keeps defending us, he'll never risk exposing the truth. Kids are the best leverage. James's voice responded, laughing. Remember when he caught us in the bedroom? Matt screamed at him for spying on you. Priceless. They were recording everything? Matt's voice cracked. No, Matt. I was. Warren's smile was cold. They were too arrogant to consider surveillance. Too convinced of their own cleverness. Would you like to hear how they planned each manipulation? How they coached you before family dinners? Or perhaps the discussion about hiding your medical history? Matt's hands shook as he picked up a medical report. What medical history? The genetic testing Linda hid wasn't just about paternity. James's family has a history of hereditary spastic paraplegia, a condition that's treatable if caught early. They knew the risks, chose to hide them to protect their affair. The room seemed to spin as Matt read the medical documentation. The mysterious symptoms he'd been experiencing, the pain, the difficulty walking, suddenly had a name and a reason. I was already wealthy again when you got that trust fund letter last year, Warren continued. The rejection was from me. Every closed door, every failed application, all orchestrated. Your beloved uncle taught me about leverage. I just learned to use it better. All this time. Matt looked up, realization dawning. The medical symptoms started right when college applications began. Timing is everything in business, Warren confirmed.
And revenge.
Matt stared at the medical reports, his future crystallizing in brutal clarity. These treatments, they're expensive. Roughly what your college tuition would have been, Warren agreed. Monthly treatments, ongoing care, specialized therapy. The kind of expenses that would cripple someone working as a barista. I'll denounce them publicly, Matt offered desperately. Tell everyone the truth about what they did. Help you destroy what's left of their reputations. Warren's laugh was devoid of warmth. Now, after 15 years, the statute of limitations on choosing sides has expired. Warren slid one final document across the desk, a comprehensive medical analysis of Matt's condition, complete with treatment protocols and prognosis timelines. Your symptoms will progress, Warren explained clinically. The treatments can slow it down, maybe even halt it at this stage. But they're specialized, expensive, the kind of medical care that requires connections. Matt stared at the treatment costs, the numbers blurring before his eyes. Please, I need help. I can't afford this on my own. No, Warren agreed. You can't. Interesting position to be in, isn't it? Your real father hid your medical history to protect his affair. Your mother chose silence to protect her lifestyle. And you? You chose them. He stood, straightening his tie. I have a meeting. Security will show you out. Dad, wait. If you contact me again, I'll ensure every potential employer knows the full story of your character. Warren's voice was final. Consider it your inheritance. You're really going to let me suffer? Matt's voice cracked. Just to prove a point? You were my greatest investment, Warren said without turning around. And like them, you proved worthless. After security escorted Matt out, Warren returned to his office. Rebecca entered quietly, tablet in hand. Sir, the acquisition documents for Biotech Innovations are ready. They're the leading researcher in genetic treatments for hereditary spastic paraplegia. Warren studied the file on his screen. A company pioneering treatments for Matt's condition. One signature would give him control of the very treatments his son desperately needed. Close the file, he commanded. Some investments aren't worth making. And the monthly surveillance reports on Matthew? Warren removed the last photo from his wallet. Matt's high school graduation, taken just before everything unraveled. The shredder hummed as it devoured the image. Discontinue them, he decided. The account is closed. Rebecca nodded and left silently. Warren turned to the window, watching Seattle's skyline darken as day faded to night. In the reflection, he could see his empire, built from the ashes of betrayal, fueled by calculated revenge. Every move, every decision, had led to this moment of final reckoning. His phone buzzed. The board was waiting. Warren straightened his tie and headed for the door. There was satisfaction in knowing his revenge was complete, but no joy. Just the cold certainty that justice, like all good investments, had finally matured. In his pocket, Linda's old phone, kept as a reminder, buzzed one final time before going dark forever. The price of betrayal 15 years later epilogue. The fluorescent lights of Nordstrom's employee break room cast harsh shadows across Linda Fletcher Morrison's aged face. At 62, she sat alone during her lunch break, scanning the financial section of the Seattle Times. Her hands trembled slightly. A nervous tic developed over years of watching her life crumble. The headline caught her eye. Fletcher Financial Forensics expands global reach. CEO Warren Fletcher named Financial Times Person of the Year. Her ex-husband's success was inescapable. His company had revolutionized fraud detection, their methods becoming industry standard. Every major financial institution used Fletcher systems. The irony wasn't lost on her. Her betrayal had birthed an empire built on catching people like James. Linda? Her supervisor's voice made her jump. Your break ended 10 minutes ago. The designer section needs restocking. She nodded, quickly gathering her measly lunch remains. After 23 years in retail, she was still just a sales associate. Every promotion attempt mysteriously fell through. Her attempts to find better jobs elsewhere met similar fates. Her tiny studio apartment waited after work, all she could afford on her salary. The country club memberships, luxury cars, and society galas felt like memories from another life. Her own family had disowned her after Warren's evidence exposed the length and extent of her affair. Her phone buzzed, a text from Matt. These were rare now, usually only when his condition flared up. Treatment costs increased again. Insurance won't cover the new medication. Don't bother responding. I know you can't help. Linda deleted the message, her hands shaking worse now. The genetic condition James had hidden, the one they'd both known about but ignored, had progressed exactly as Warren's final documents predicted. Every time she saw Matt struggle with his mobility, guilt ate at her soul. Across town, in a rundown rehabilitation facility, James Fletcher stared out his window. At 65, he was a shell of the confident hedge fund manager he'd once been. Prison had aged him harshly, 8 years for financial fraud, served in medium security where his fellow inmates had particular disdain for white-collar criminals who stole from children's college funds. Mr. Fletcher? A nurse entered with his medications. Your physical therapy session starts in 10 minutes. He nodded silently. The injury from a prison yard accident had left him with a permanent limp. His cellmate had somehow learned about him, hiding his son's medical condition. Karma, as they said, was unforgiving. After his release, he tried returning to finance. Every potential employer, every business contact suddenly remembered urgent appointments. Warren's influence was absolute. The very systems James had once mocked as paranoid now monitored every significant financial transaction globally. His current residence, a shabby room in a state-funded facility, was a far cry from his former mansions. His prison sentence had been just the beginning. The SEC fines had wiped out his hidden accounts. Civil lawsuits from former clients had claimed the rest. The offshore accounts he'd carefully built had mysteriously emptied just before he could access them. He kept a newspaper clipping on his nightstand, Warren's company going public 5 years ago. The IPO had made his brother a multi-billionaire. The same day, James had received final rejection for disability benefits, forcing him to move into state-subsidized housing. Across the country, in a modest Baltimore office, Matt Fletcher reviewed another medical bill. At 45, the hereditary condition had progressed significantly. His mobility was limited, requiring a cane on good days, a wheelchair on bad ones. The treatments delayed the worst symptoms but couldn't reverse the damage from delayed intervention. His computer dinged, another job application rejection. Despite his qualifications, despite years of experience, mysterious concerns still followed him. His current position as a data entry clerk was the best he'd managed, barely covering his basic needs. The treatments alone would have bankrupted him, but they were mysteriously covered by an anonymous health insurance policy. The carrier refused to disclose the source, but Matt knew. Warren's final revenge was ensuring his son lived to experience the consequences of his choices, lived to watch his mother and James suffer, lived to understand the true cost of loyalty misplaced. Sandra Martinez, Warren's former assistant from his revenge days, now served as Fletcher Financial's chief operating officer. She remembered the day Warren had called her into his office, 15 years after Matt's final visit. Set up a blind trust, he'd instructed. Anonymous health insurance coverage for Matthew Fletcher. Premium treatments, best specialists. He lives with it, but he doesn't suffer unnecessarily. That's not the point. Yes, sir, she'd responded, understanding perfectly. Warren's revenge had never been about causing pain. It was about consequences. Natural, inevitable consequences of choices made. In his penthouse office atop the Fletcher Financial Tower, Warren Fletcher, now 70, reviewed quarterly reports. His company had offices in 30 countries, their algorithms protecting trillions in transactions daily. The Peterson scandal that had exposed James felt like ancient history, a footnote in the company's origin story. Rebecca Chen, his executive assistant of 23 years, entered with his afternoon schedule. Sir? The acquisition of biotech innovations is complete. Warren nodded. The company he'd once considered buying to control Matt's treatment options had struggled for years before becoming available at a bargain price. Now it would be restructured, its research expanded, its treatments made more accessible, not for Matt, but for others with the condition. A final twist of the knife. Watching others receive help his son had forfeited. His desk held no family photos now. The space once occupied by Matt's picture remained empty, a deliberate void marking choices that couldn't be unmade. The annual surveillance reports on Linda, James, and Matt had grown thinner over the years. Their lives had settled into patterns of quiet desperation, each day a reminder of what they'd lost. Thompson, the Fletchers' former butler, now managed Warren's domestic staff. He'd been rewarded for his years of quiet observation, his detailed notes about Linda and James's indiscretions proving invaluable. Loyalty, Warren had learned, should be reciprocated, whether in reward or punishment. The sun set over Seattle's skyline as Warren reviewed one final document, a petition from a local hospital. They wanted to name their new genetic research wing after him. The facility would specialize in early intervention for hereditary conditions like Matt's. Approve it, he told Rebecca, but add a condition. Prominent display of statistics about genetic conditions worsened by delayed treatment. Let it be educational, she nodded, understanding as always. Even now, decades later, every move served the greater design. The hospital wing would stand as a monument to consequences. Young parents would read those statistics and think twice about hiding medical histories from their children. Linda would see the wing's name in the paper tomorrow during her break. James would hear about it from his physical therapist. Matt would pass it every month going to his treatments. Each of them would understand the message. Every choice has consequences, every betrayal its price, every debt its reckoning. Warren turned back to his work. The markets waited for no one, and there were patterns to analyze, frauds to uncover, justice to dispense. His revenge had transformed into something larger, a legacy built on exposing deception, protecting the vulnerable, ensuring consequences found their mark. The sun disappeared behind the Olympic Mountains, painting the sky in shades of judgment. In 3 different parts of the city, 3 people paused in their diminished lives, feeling the weight of choices made decades ago. Their comfortable worlds had crumbled not with a bang, but with the quiet precision of a master accountant balancing his books. After all, Warren Fletcher had always believed in perfect ledgers. And now, finally, all accounts were settled.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy the story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.